Okay, so I've already gone over and introduced to you our first project, the structure project, and I've given you the parameters and what our goals are, what we're trying to achieve on this first project. So I thought I'd take some time here to do a little demo and show you how to approach this. How do we start on these projects, right? Well, the first thing we want to do is, of course, is start our creative juices flowing. We want to come up with what we call thumbnail sketches. This is where we just basically get into our sketchbook. You're going to open up your sketchbook. Give yourself a number of little frames to work within. You don't have to be extremely careful about this. Give yourself some little squares to work within, and then just start working from one to the other to divide the space. This whole structure project is about division of space and kind of creating an underlying foundation of the composition you're eventually going to develop. So anyway, that's where we're going to start. Just kind of get our ideas flowing. I've already done a couple little examples here. Again, I just quickly, just freehand. I don't use my ruler and create these little squares. Just freehand go in there and create some little windows that I will very quickly come up with a number of ideas. Rarely do we come up with the perfect solution on our first time out. So hence, it benefits the whole creative process if you give yourself a bunch of little windows and very quickly just kind of work along so that you can say, okay, here's a good idea, let me do something different in this next one and move along. So suggestions I may want to consider, asymmetry. Asymmetry has to do with balance. We've got symmetry, perfect placement of objects or elements on either side of a vertical or horizontal axis, and asymmetry, which is more of a perceived balance. I tend to encourage people to think more asymmetrically. It's always a little more interesting. So if I'm going to start with this, I'm not going to go ahead and divide that space right in half. I'll move a line over here, maybe off to the left first, and say, okay, now how do I want to respond to that? I'll put down maybe a division down here along the bottom. Okay, keep thinking, just go ahead, don't obsess over it too much. Go ahead and move freely, kind of just try to work around the little picture plane and keep moving and just see what you come up with, because again, you're not beholden to anything. You can go ahead and you got a bunch of other squares that you get to work in here shortly anyway, so just go ahead and work around. You can do what's called broken or implied line, a line that maybe comes along and ends at this one, but then jumps over that space and continues on the other side as well. So there aren't any real rules other than the rule that I told you about when I was introducing the project. We want to try to avoid creating any kind of a focal point on this particular project. So you want to move around. I'll talk about the things that tend to create focal points. We want the eye to move freely throughout the composition and not get kind of hung up on one area or another. But we also want to kind of create some interest as well, which we will achieve through varying our line weights. Line weight, I'm referring to the thickness of each line once we start. Go ahead and transfer to our paper and cut those up into pieces, and we'll think about the line weights that are distributed across the surface there. So, okay, there's another. Let me try another one real quick. As you can see, I'm not spending a whole lot of time on this. Just coming up with ideas. It's like almost each line will tell you, okay, where do I go with this next one? Now each little division of space may say, okay, how about over here? And maybe I want to create a little more active area, so I'll put a line very close to one of the other verticals I have there. Well, that kind of creates a focal point, so I'll want to counterbalance that with another one over on this side of it. What else here? That's good. Let me try another one over here. Okay, let's try starting off with a horizontal division. And maybe a little vertical down here. I'll counterbalance with a vertical over here on the right. eyes moving pretty freely through there. It's still a little bit boring, and I'm going to add some more divisions just to create a little more activity and more interest throughout the whole picture plane. Let me do another implied line here. I'll start here and go ahead and continue over here. That's good. So anyway, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. I've got a lot of other things I want to show you while I'm doing this little demo here, but you get the idea. Just kind of spend your time, spend a half hour, 30 minutes, 45 minutes going through and just coming up with a lot of ideas that you can look at. And once you've got those drawn out, again, I'd probably go ahead and do a whole page of these. And of course, these are just the stable structure plate. Of course, we're going to be doing both horizontal and vertical stable plate, as well as a dynamic plate, which would, of course, is going to deal with diagonal lines, which create dynamics and movement. So I'll just do a little quick sketch of a diagonal here, dynamic design. So again, you're just going to be, this will be the this stable verticals and horizontals, and then I'd go probably do another whole page of the dynamic images as well. So, excuse me, I'm trying to get this in frame here, so I hope you can all see that clearly. Anyway, so that's where we start. It's just coming up with your thumbnail ideas, your thumbnail sketches. This is where every designer starts the whole creative process in their mind and gets things going. So once you have created and come along and made a decision on which one of those designs you're going to take to finish, at that point, you will switch to your black and white papers. So again, we will be working with all of our plates will be done on these 8 by 8 inch sheets of paper that you've got. For this particular project, you can either do black shapes mounted to the white paper, black shapes cut up and mounted to the white papers, which will result in white lines dividing this black space, or you can do it the other way if you choose to, and put white shapes over the top of your black paper, which would, of course, give you a white field with black lines. So I've gone ahead and laid out this design in advance, just the one that I chose, which happens to be this little top one up here in the corner. So I've got that laid out. Now I'm going to start addressing the line weights, make up my decision on what kind of lines I want, thins and thicks, where I want those. Again, those will help give variety to the page and make it a little more interesting throughout the image. So first thing I want to talk about is how to cut your sheets up. So you'll want to have your x-acto knife, nice sharp brand new x-acto knife. You'll want to use your metal edge ruler. Make sure that you have that ruler. Be careful, lay it down in place, and just very carefully, don't get in a hurry, put that x-acto knife blade and just carefully run that across. Get a nice clean straight cut all the way across. So what I do is I keep a little square already pre-laid out so I can remember how to lay these down on the white background once I start laying it out and gluing it down. So I'll go ahead and place that there. Now I want to make a little thin line. I'll say, okay, what if I just cut that off and I want a little thin line across there. So I'll just take off another little 1/8 of an inch. I wouldn't make any of your lines thinner than 1/8 of an inch, and I wouldn't make them any thicker than 3/8 of an inch. If they get much thicker than 3/8 inch, they start looking pretty heavy and kind of clunky. So, okay, let's see what's next. So essentially, I've got this little thin line that's created across the top. Let me move my coffee so you can see that. This is how I'm going to have it. So my first line there is going to be a rather thin little division line. I'll go ahead and cut out this next shape first, next, and say, okay, what do I want? Do I want that line to be a little thicker? Cut down to that line. Cut across. Take off a little bit. I'll make this about 1/4 of an inch thick. I'll go ahead and place that up where it goes in place. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the next shape next to that. I'm just trying to create a process step by step so that I remember exactly how I was going to make that 1/4 of an inch line. So I'll put that about 1/4 inch away from that other shape I just cut, and 1/8 of an inch down from that top shape. So the next one I have is this little shape right here. So again, I'm kind of going in statement, working around the edges so that I'll kind of basically get and build into the center with this. What do I want to make that next little line, the space between this shape and this next shape next to it? Let me think about that. Let me go ahead and probably make that one just a little bit, another 1/8 inch space between them, another thin line. Inch, 1/8 inch. So there I've got a thin, a thick, and a thin line. There we're getting a little bit of variety going on. Now this next little shape, kind of putting it together like a little puzzle. The reason I'm laying this out in this fashion here is so that I know where I'm going when I start transferring and gluing these down to the white sheet. It will be my backing sheet. So just trying to make this process as simple as possible for all of you. It can get a little confusing on how to approach this if you've never done it before. So let's see, I need to, of course, create a little bit of a line there for this one, which again I think I'm going to stick with a thin, what will be horizontal line. Let's go up here, cut this little shape that will reside up there. Let's see, I think I want a thick line there. Sometimes it'll help if you go ahead and mark out your thicks and thins in advance. I'm kind of thinking on the fly here, so I fit that within that little frame, making sure I've got that thin 1/8 inch line running horizontally across the top. Thin, 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch here. This one I see I need to trim just a little bit. Now I'm going to create this shape here. So I want to continue that thick line dropping vertically. Again, some students find it helpful to go ahead and on the white backing sheet that they're working on, that they're going to be gluing these parts down to go ahead and draw out the full pattern of the thicks and thins that they want to follow throughout. Let me get this all straightened out so I make sure everything lines up cleanly. Okay. Where to next? Let's go down this side here. So I want to continue that thick line all the way down this 1/4 inch line. I'm going to continue that all the way straight down to the bottom. So let me go ahead and cut those shapes. Refer to my, okay, that runs right to now. That actually ends right there. So I'm going to continue. This is going to be a thin shape here actually. Got that one, I've got this one, and that one. I'm going to run a thin, we got this thick shape here, I'm going to run a thin line down and I'll put a thicker horizontal on that one instead, and that brings me right down to the bottom corner. Okay, so where are we at now? Kind of taking, looking at it and making an assessment. I'm going to keep this thin line. I'll let that run thin all the way across. I've got a thin line here. I'm probably going to go ahead and put a thicker line over here to kind of give me some attention, draw my attention over here. So let me cut out this next shape here, and I will Of course, I'm doing a demonstration for you here, so I'm taking this a little quicker than I want you to go, of course. I want you to take your time and really kind of get a feel for it. I'm also going to be looking at what we call craftsmanship, how clean your cuts are, how straight your lines are. There's things that you're going to develop your hand skills here throughout. This is a perfect place to start developing your critical eye on lines that are straight, that don't wobble, that are consistent in line weight. So I'm going to go ahead and keep a thin line coming down here. I want a thicker line between this shape and the one that's going to be next to it. so that I have some nice thicks and thins. I got this thick up here, I'll bring it thick down, thick up here. I'll probably bring another thick line down into this lower area just so I have some other areas that draw my attention. Again, keep in mind we want to try to create this design so we don't have our eye drawn to any particular focal point or any certain area of importance. Now, since CS School was gracious enough to buy us x-acto knives and supply us with a few of our tools and such, I really want to encourage you to use your x-acto knife as opposed to getting scissors and try to cut straight lines. You'll always get a lot straighter and more effective line quality when you work with your x-acto knife. So I want to create a thick over here, a thick line, so I'm going to go ahead and, again, do not get any wider than 3/8 of an inch. So I want a thick over here to counterbalance. Getting close, you guys, closing in on our objective here. So I got this thick, and that thick, kind of work with each other. Make sure I've got that lined up. I'm going to have a thin line. I like that thin horizontal, another thin horizontal. I'll probably put down a thick line down over here at the very bottom just to kind of counterbalance the thins of all those horizontals. Let me cut this shape and another thing to think about when you're cutting your shapes, the paper that you're cutting away from is where you want to hold your straight edge down the ruler so that the shape that you're cutting will fall off of your ruler and cut away from that sheet of paper. So okay, I like this thin, thick, thin line. I like that very thin little whisper of a line that looks like it's going outside of my perimeter, so I'm going to go ahead and shave that down just a little bit to put that in place. Okay, so we're down to our last three little shapes here. I'm going to go ahead and maybe place a thicker horizontal down here. Let me take off just a little edge off of there so it fits within my perimeter and matches that other vertical. And now we have two more pieces to deal with here, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this bottom shape. See that I could either make it a nice thick or a thin. What do I want to do here? I kind of like the way this horizontal thin works with these thicker horizontals above it. So again, I'm going to go ahead and mark how much I need to take off the bottom to fit it within the perimeter of this 8x8 space. Okay, one last little shape to deal with here. What do I want as far as line weight goes there? I think I want to keep a real thin line to contrast against the larger line above it. I can give myself some little marks on where I need to trim that off. And there it goes. So there's the completion of the parts cut and laid in place how I want them in order. I've created variation of line weight and direction of those lines. I feel that it's pretty competent as far as the division of space. I don't find my eye going to any directly to one space. Is there any changes that I could perhaps make to add a little more interest? I don't think so. I'm going to keep it pretty simple there. So, Kai, can you zoom in on that a little bit? Are you able to? I'll turn this so you can see it. I'll have you know I've got a very famous professional videographer here working with me today, who's working for next to nothing since. But, can you see that? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lay that over there. Now I'm going to just end up our little demo this morning with show you how to mount these to your. So we've got this laid out how we want it. Now we've got our 8x8 white sheet, of which we're going to lay these sheets down. Now, you're working with our adhesive is rubber cement. So rubber cement we want to, it's called dry mount in a brand new, freshly sealed can that I can't seem to open here. I'm really not this weak, it's just really on here tight. So, Kai, run over to my toolbox and grab me some pliers. You should see some on the top pile there. Just look what you can find there. There should be some pliers right on the top. Oh, you don't need to do that. Look over to your right, over on the shelf below the stereo. Big old pile of tools, and there should be some pliers.
Oh, gotcha.
Got it? Sorry, I'm trying to be prepared for everything, but I wasn't prepared for this, so here comes to the rescue. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, let's see now. Can I get this open? I need channel locks. Is this okay? These will work. I'll get these to work somehow. It's like they welded it shut. Okay, channel locks.
Yeah, I was looking for those. Here we go. Oh.
Best laid plans, right when you think everything's right in place and everything's going to work smoothly, something always gets you. So, channel locks. Have your channel locks on hand if you need to get your rubber cement can open. There we go. Now we're working. Thank you, Chris.
Welcome.
Okay. So I mentioned with rubber cement we want to do what's called a dry mount. What that means is we take both surfaces that we're gluing together and put a layer down of rubber cement on both surfaces and let them dry before we lay them out. So what I'm going to do here is grab one of my, I like to kind of just squeegee on the surface that I'm building on top of, get a nice smooth consistent layer of very thin, it doesn't need to be laid down there thick, just a very consistent layer on this so that I can, and I'll grab one of my credit cards because they're not worth anything anyway. Kai knows I don't have any credit worth a damn. So anyway, I use that as kind of a little squeegee to kind of lay down. Of course, it comes with a brush. You can lay it on with a brush as well, but I found this is just really an effective way to kind of spread it around and get a nice, consistent, even coat around the entire surface. lightly, equally coated. One more right there in the middle. Okay, just be careful, make sure that you've got a nice even coat over the entire surface. And set that aside for a moment and let that dry. Make sure I got this corner up here. So there, I've got a very nice, thin, smooth coat. Oh, I can see a little shiny area. It doesn't look like it got a little down here.
Are you paying me with that credit card?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, great.
You'll be back at my door before the night's out. Okay, so again, I put down a nice even coat over the entire surface, and I'm going to let that set aside for a moment while it dries. And at this point, I'm just going to kind of I'll start from the top, and I'll go ahead and take this shape here, and keep in mind I want about 1/8 of an inch line, so I'll go ahead and for this I'll just use the brush that comes with it. And go ahead and put down a nice little smooth coat over the top of that. Let that dry for just a moment. I see that I'm missing another one of my tools here, so while you watch this dry, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Hopefully you got one of these. This is called a rubber cement pickup, and this is what we will be using to clean up after we've completed laying all of these parts in place. So again, you'll want to wait until it'll turn matte. As long as it's shiny, it's still wet. So, and it just takes a few moments to dry, but you want to wait until this surface is dry and that surface is dry. Of course, this one is dry already, so, and this one is just about ready. So I'm going to go ahead and carefully lay that in place. Being very accurate. It's a little sticky, but I want to make sure that I've got that right where it goes. Lay it down across that top edge perfectly. And there's the first step. Okay, let's start working our way down. Again, I work from the edges across and just start so I can kind of keep in mind what I want. So I know that I want to have this next piece will have a thick 1/4 inch line. So go ahead and put a thin coat. Again, don't get too thick. You want this to dry quickly. So just put a nice thin coat of rubber cement on there. You can blow on it, that'll help it dry even quicker. So I want about 1/8 of an inch horizontal line across there, so I'm going to carefully set that down about 1/8 of an inch below and right along that edge. And if you get old sticky fingers, you know, the rubber cement just kind of rubs off, and don't worry about this. We're going to go ahead and clean it up with the rubber cement pickup after we get all these little pieces in place. I'm going to move a little bit slowly because I know this can be about as exciting as watching grass growing. So let me kind of move along quickly. This one I wanted to have a thick that down. This one's going to have a thin line here, so we'll go ahead and place this. Isn't that funny how I turned that ringer off and it's still
Still goes.
with the distractions of working in the studio. In preparation of this, I turned my phone off so it wouldn't ring and distract me, but it's in there ringing. But at least we haven't had the normal Harley Davidson riding by outside and disrupting us.
Jinx.
It's noise. Thick, thin, thick. So you're just basically, again, kind of laying in. If it helps you to go ahead and draw out your plan with the thicks and thins before so you can lay it on into a framework, that's good. I'm just trying to save a little bit of time here. So now I've worked my way over here. Now I'm going to work back this direction again. Make sure that you get your pieces covered well. Sure your corners line up again. This is the kind of craftsmanship I'm going to be looking for, to make sure that lines don't waver, that things are going, you know, that are consistent, and line weight is, the line quality is good all the way around. So I've got this little piece that fit right in here. Continue that line across, so just double check if I've got the size right, or do I need to trim that? I think that I do. Okay, where are we at now? So we've got the towel path kind of laid in place. Let's keep moving. I'm going to work over and start over on this corner here. And what do we have? We have a nice thin line over here. And thin and thick. Now I told you to let this dry before you place it down. That's for permanence. In the interest of keeping your attention here, I'm going to go ahead and speed this up by putting these down before they're absolutely dry. Again, as thin a coat as you can put on there helps. you find some little sticky and it's kind of getting dirty, it's because your fingers have oils on them and dirt, and don't worry about that. When we get it done at the end, our rubber cement pickup will clean all of this stuff up and make it just look beautiful at the very end. So don't get too concerned if it looks a little bit sloppy at this point. We'll get it all cleaned up here shortly. So I wanted thick, thin, thin. I wanted to be a little bit thicker on this line here. And keeping the consistency of that thin line across there horizontally. So that brings us over to this one, which can fit right in there. Do I already have that cut? Yep. Line that up right along this edge here carefully. It's going to give me a real thin division line right down there. I kind of like that. This really super thin line. Come down here and put this lower one in. Down in the very bottom corner. And this one's moving around on me a little bit because I just got impatient and didn't wait for it to dry mount. As I will encourage you people, don't get impatient. Let your rubber cement dry before you place those little pieces where they go. Okay, winding it down here. Let me see where this one goes. Nice little thin across the bottom there. And again, once this is all dried and down in place, we're going to go ahead and clean it up. And if worse comes to worse, if you're hanging over a little bit on the edges, you'll just flip that over and trim it up a little bit. It rarely comes out perfectly like you laid it out. Same thing happens when I come up with a painting. When I'm doing a painting, an illustration, or whatever I'm working with, I've got an idea in my head of what I want to complete, but does it ever turn out exactly like that in the end? No. I think my friend Chris here will agree to that. Chris is a very good artist and painter as well. And do your paintings always turn out exactly like you imagine them when you're starting out?
Never.
Never.
Lesson learned.
So I'm going to go ahead and I like that little thin line across the very bottom there. Getting close, folks, getting close. We just have one last little piece to put in here. Now again, like your parents always said to you, do as I say, not as I do. I want you, obviously I've kind of raced through this whole demonstration pretty quickly and created a complete project that you will be turning in, the one of the two plates that we will be doing for our first project here. But I would like you to take your time. This is going to be your first time. For many of you, first time out, just learning the process of cutting straight lines, learning of working with the rubber cement and how it gets all over your fingertips and such. But again, once it's dried out, if I look over, I can see I've got some few little edges that are kind of raggedy. So what I'll do is turn it over and do it on top of this paper here, just so I can go ahead and again get my metal edge razor, put it right along that edge, and if I need to, I'll go ahead and clean it up and trim off any little edges that may have been. You can almost cut just a hair's width off of the entire thing and get this nice, clean, straight edges. This is, when you look at the grading rubric that I'll use, there's a section addressing craftsmanship. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm looking for straight lines. I'm looking for good, clean cuts. Be careful and learn to use your tools so that you get really excellent results. Be careful. So, okay, I've got that all squared. It's all cleaned up. I'm happy with the design, the distribution of thin and thicker lines. My eye moves evenly across this whole image. The last thing I want to do is clean it up, because you'll see that there's some rubber cement on some of the surfaces. There's obviously rubber cement on all the white areas. So be ginger when you do this. Carefully kind of just use your rubber cement pickup. Hold the shapes down in place while you do that. And anywhere that you may have transferred rubber cement onto the surface of either the black shapes, and of course you want to go through and chase all the white areas because they've got that original coat that you laid down initially over the whole sheet. So basically you just want to carefully chase all of these lines. If there's any little fuzzies along the edges of your shape, these rubber cement pickups work well for kind of cleaning up those edges as well. This is made of crepe pad. They make shoe soles out of this material as well. But it's perfect little tool for being able to clean up all this rubber cement without leaving any marks on the surface of the paper. And again, that rubber cement will clean up and come right off of those shapes that you've laid down. Now again, it's up to you whether you want to do black shapes on a white background or reverse it out and do white shapes on a black background. I think they look more dynamic on a black background, a little more impact, impressive. So, class, this is where we're going. This is where we're heading for this project. Make sure that you've cleaned it up well. You want to, again, this is the time where we start developing both our hand skills and our eyes. You want to start developing your sensitivity to what a really clean, professional job looks like. I know for many of you this is our first time out working with these kind of materials and talking about these concepts that we'll be exploring throughout the semester. But this again is our very basic first step, is just kind of again developing our hand skills, learning how to create nice, good, clean cuts, lay them down carefully, and to eventually come up with this beautiful little design. It can work any different direction, so it's totally up to you. Now you can see I need a little cleanup right there. That rubber cement sneaky stuff. So look at it from every direction and make sure that you've got all your rubber cement pulled off, and you should end up with a wonderful little design when you're done. So thank you. This, of course, is the first step of our two-plate project, the one that you will be doing. The same process comprised all of diagonal lines and such. So with that, I will come back to class and get back on Zoom and talk to you and excuse the class for the evening. So thank you.